consensus among experts that whatever happened aboard that missing airliner appears to be intentional. Tonight, what investigators have uncovered 1 week since it vanished. On the brink, Russian forces exert total control in Crimea on the eve of a controversial vote to break away from Ukraine. Richard Engel is there as the world braces for what happens next. Breakthrough, a Herculean effort to crack a once-in-a-generation freeze on the Great Lakes. We're aboard for the mission. And against all odds, a mother who never gave up searching for the daughter she lost so long ago. Tonight, their incredible reunion. Nightly News begins now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening, Brian is off tonight. I'm Lester Holt. As we reach the 1 week mark in the search for that missing Malaysian jet, experts agree that what we are witnessing is unprecedented in modern aviation history. A large airliner packed with people flying far from where it was supposed to be and then vanishing without a trace. Tonight, there is new information showing the Boeing 777 made not one, but at least 2 changes of course after it appeared to vanish from radar screens. And that has dramatically shifted the focus of search efforts, while at the same time expanding the possibilities of where the plane ended up. So much about this flight simply doesn't add up, but that which does has investigators tonight accepting the real possibility that someone deliberately flew this plane into danger. NBC's Tom Costello leads us off again tonight. Tom, I know they've been analyzing some data. What is it now telling them about the path of this jet?
Yeah, government sources say investigators are trying to determine if this plane headed north or south out over the Indian Ocean. To do that, they're using brand new technology to trace an electronic ping off a satellite, similar to your cell phone pinging a tower even when you're not communicating. But that trace may only narrow the search zone to hundreds, perhaps thousands of miles. More than 7 days since Flight 370 disappeared, and still no firm sign of where the Boeing 777 with its passengers and crew might be. Malaysian authorities today laid out some of the possibilities.
It could have been done intentionally. It could be done under duress. It could be done because of an explosion. So that's why I do not want to go into the realm of speculation.
Here's what investigators have. The military radar tapes showing the plane left its flight path, made a deliberate U-turn, and headed west over the Strait of Malacca. The ACARS data, the plane's automated reporting system, stopped transmitting data at 1:07 a.m. The pings. The plane did continue to send automated pings once an hour to an orbiting satellite. They were received by Inmarsat satellite in London, which said in a statement, routine automated signals were registered on the Inmarsat network from Flight 370 during its flight from Kuala Lumpur. Now, investigators hope to use those pings to calculate where the plane might have flown in 4 to 5 hours.
And hopefully with more work on the data and more refinement, if you will, they can get a very good idea where the aircraft went.
The new massive search zone now stretches from the Strait of Malacca to the Bay of Bengal, where the Indian Navy is searching. The USS Kidd is now in the area as well. A P-8 anti-submarine plane loaded with underwater search technology should start working tomorrow. We talked to Commander William Marks.
There's no way you can search the entire Indian Ocean. A ship is an amazing platform, but it can't be done with ships alone. And even our P-3 and P-8, with a range of 1,000 or so miles, they'll have to return.
If they ever find the wreckage, the black boxes will be critical to uncovering what happened. The FDR should hold 24 hours of plane data.
The flight data recorder will tell us hundreds, if not thousands, of parameters that are recorded on the airplane, what the airplane physically did.
But the cockpit voice recorder only holds the last 2 hours, which means we may never know what happened in the cockpit that caused Flight 370 to turn around. Investigators are also looking into what was in the cargo hold of the plane. Was there some explosive or flammable cargo on board? They're looking at that as well. Lester?
Tom Costello, thanks. And if you keep with the theory this was a deliberate act, you have to assume everyone who boarded that plane is under investigation, passengers and crew, as authorities explore all possibilities, trying to determine who might have had a motive and the ability to commandeer that plane. NBC's Keir Simmons is in Kuala Lumpur.
As the search for Flight 370 continues, Malaysian officials are now looking at how the plane could have disappeared and who might be involved. including the crew. The flight's captain, Zahiri Shah, in his 50s, highly experienced, he'd logged 18,000 flight hours. His co-pilot, Farik Hamid, 27, relatively new, with 2,800 flight hours. Both are being investigated, but so is everyone who was on board. The key questions: who else on board could fly a 777? Who might have had a motive to commandeer the aircraft, and for what purpose? And if the plane was hijacked, where was it going? During the crucial first hour of the flight, there would have been an opportunity to break into the cockpit, despite security precautions.
If there were to be a real takeover, as that will be the time where the crew members will be moving in and out to serve the cockpit the drinks.
There were prayers for Flight 370 today at the co-pilot's local mosque. Friends here call him a quiet, respectful man, living with his parents in this middle-class home.
Hi, everyone.
Less is known about the pilot, seen here in home improvement videos. He has a flight simulator at home, a man dedicated to flying. But Malaysian officials aren't telling us much more than that. So the wait for answers continues, so painful for family and friends of those on board. Here at the airport, they've filled this wall with prayers and messages of hope for loved ones they may never see again. Keir Simmons, NBC News, Kuala Lumpur.
We now want to bring in aviation expert Greg Fife. He's a former senior air safety director with the National Transportation Safety Board and a veteran pilot. Let's put to the side for a moment the question of who was flying the airplane. We heard in Tom's report they're now looking at two possible course changes, one to the north, one to the south. If you're trying to escape detection, if that's your motive, which is the more likely route?
Lester, the more likely route is the southern route, because once you cross that little peninsula, now you're in open ocean. There is no radar coverage down there. It is a vast, vast ocean going almost as far down as the South Pole.
Well, in fact, we looked at that graphic there, and it points down off the coast of Australia. Should they be searching in that part of the world now? Does the search area become that big?
I think so. They're going to have to put assets down there, since now they have a north track and a south track, and I would be looking primarily in the south track. And in fact, with Australia being down there, I may even request basically help from Australia to assist in the search of that part of the ocean.
You know, I said earlier today, we've gone past the far-fetched point of this. Everything is really kind of on the table. And one of the things talked about, well, maybe whoever took it wanted to land this plane somewhere. Sure. If you take that southern route, there's really no place to go.
There is no place. I mean, it is open ocean. You can land it in the water, but, if you're going that direction and your intent basically is to just do something bad to the aircraft, that's the place to do it, because if that airplane even breaks up and sinks, that's a vast part of the ocean in the world. You may never, ever find the main wreckage. You may find some floating debris at some point, but that is a place to get rid of the airplane.
Can't recall a head scratcher like this one.
Nope.
Greg Fife, thank you. And an update on a story that happened while we were on the air last night, an incident involving an aircraft, this one of a very different nature. Officials say an accident on the runway at Philadelphia International Airport happened when a tire of front landing gear blew out on a U.S. Airways jet. It was headed for Florida. It forced the pilot to abort takeoff. There were no reports of any serious injuries. The crippled plane was removed from the runway. It's now in a hangar where it will be examined by investigators. And in New York City, officials say they have recovered all of the victims after that massive building explosion earlier this week. And all of the missing have been accounted for. The final death toll stands at 8, with some 60 people injured. A key turning point of the crisis in Ukraine is coming this weekend. Voters head to the polls for a controversial referendum over Crimea. But with diplomatic efforts stalled and Russian troops firmly in control in Crimea, some say the outcome is already decided. NBC's chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, managed to make his way to Crimea. He joins us from there tonight. Richard, good evening.
Good evening, Lester. In some ways, this referendum is a moot point. Russian forces already control Crimea. They took it without a fight, and they won't give it up. For now, Crimea is still part of Ukraine. But these men have already sworn allegiance to Russia, and today showed their strength under a statue of Lenin in Simferopol, Crimea's biggest city. They're a tough-looking, ragtag bunch, armed with clubs and dressed in whatever they can get their hands on. These men and their Russian backers now run things here, and many Crimeans believe the upcoming referendum is just a rubber stamp for a takeover by force that's already happened. A takeover accomplished by thousands of Russian troops controlling bases, airports, and other key facilities. And many Crimeans are happy they're here. Russia has popular support in Crimea. Irena, a psychologist, told us Crimea was once the jewel of the Soviet Union. There are voices of dissent, but they're faint. A few hundred today marched to give Crimea part of Ukraine. But they held their demonstration by a roadside, run out of town by the pro-Russia militias.
Do you think that Crimea is now occupied by Russia?
Yeah, obviously. It's occupation.
But this isn't just about Crimea anymore. Russia has mobilized 10,000 troops near Ukraine's border. Ukraine showed off its weapons too, but they're no match for the Russian forces many worry may be coming for eastern Ukraine next. Already clashes have broken out there. Russia's foreign minister told Secretary of State Kerry today his country's troops will go no further into Ukraine. But their faces show frustration and deep mistrust. Here in Crimea, the facts are clear. The Russian flag flies over Parliament, the building under guard. President Obama today again threatened sanctions. Diplomats tell us they're not so much about trying to pry Crimea away from Russia. Even U.S. officials acknowledge that's unlikely, but more about trying to deter Russia from going any further. Lester?
Richard, thank you. And an update now on our special series, Syria and the Children of War. You might recall our Dr. Nancy Snyderman told us about those premature twins born at a hospital along the Syria-Lebanon border. One died at childbirth, and sadly we've now learned that the second baby has also died, in part because of breathing complications. As for the 19-month-old girl who doctors feared might have polio, they are still waiting for final test results, but they say her paralysis could be a small brain hemorrhage and may be treatable. They're cautiously optimistic she will walk again. Still ahead tonight, Historic 3 is the amazing mission to break the ice on the Great Lakes after the kind of winter not seen in decades. We probably don't need to remind you that it's been a long and brutal winter, and all those storms and frigid temps didn't just make a mess of the country's roads, rails, and skies. It's also snarled traffic on key rivers and lakes, including the Great Lakes. Earlier this month, 92% of them were covered in ice, and clearing those important shipping lanes is no easy task. We get our from NBC's John Yang.
The first thing you notice is the sound. Constant deep rumble as the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Alder breaks up ice that's covered Lake Superior for months. Conditions are hard for the crew, single-digit temperatures and winds topping 25 knots. And for the vessel,
you feel the ship shaking right now?
Yeah.
It rattles everything. Bolts come loose, pipes break, pipes freeze, or ice gets clogged in the filters.
Off Duluth, Minnesota, the 295-foot Alder pushes through ice as thick as 4 feet, freeing these 1,000-foot ore carriers, literally frozen in place.
Without the icebreakers making the ports ready for commerce, it wouldn't move until the ice was essentially gone.
The ship's reinforced bow drives onto the ice, crushing it under the weight. This concrete block weighs 16,000 pounds. It's one of 3 on the deck here to give the Alder extra weight as it breaks through ice up to several feet thick.